of the Board of Trustees. We have some here in person, and it's great to see everyone. Happy New Year. And we have some joining us by phone. So as we go through the process, I just want to tell you that at the end of the meeting, I would ask that we adjourn this meeting in honor of Charlotte Police Officer Maya Goodwin, as well as Master Trooper Horton from Forest City, North Carolina, who both participants in these plans who, like others, lost their lives in the line of duty. So with that, we'll call the meeting to order, and we'll start by asking you to stand and join us in our Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome Blake Thomas. Who's the flag? Oh, yes. This is our pledge to the North Carolina flag. I salute the flag of North Carolina and pledge to the old North State love, loyalty, and faith. Thank you. I'd like to welcome Blake Thomas as a designee of Barbara Gibson from OSHR. If you leave the room and go that way, it means I'm going to hand the gavel to Blake. Blake used to be the general counsel at the Office of State Treasurer, and he can run these meetings a lot better than I can. So he begged me not to do that, but it could happen. So anyway, welcome, Blake. If anyone wishes to make a public comment, please email us in the public comment section. Please note the meeting is being recorded and will be posted online, as well as all board materials. We ask that those joining us online, especially mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. We'll take all roll calls by all votes by roll call, and without objection, those that make the motion and the second will be considered yes votes without objection. If you have to leave the meeting at any point, please announce your departure as well as your return as well, so that they can be recorded in minutes. Likewise, state your name. Finally, most importantly, any text or other recorded communication between board members during the meeting on personal phones or public records to the extent they concern the meeting are considered to be. Also, I want to welcome back Greg Patterson to our board, who's, as I described to him, as sort of like Hotel California. You can check out and you can never leave. Thank you, Trevor. And the Eagles are coming to Raleigh here in the next few weeks, so maybe you go hear that song for yourself. With that, Secretary, will you call the roll?
Okay, and we'll do the TSERS board first. Dale Falwell.
Here.
Blake Thomas.
Here.
Catherine Truitt. Catherine Truitt is going to be a few minutes late. Dirk German. Here. Greg Patterson.
Checked in.
Jeffrey Winstead. John Ebbinghausen.
Present.
Joshua Smith. Joshua Smith. Who's going to call in? Lance Brewer. Lance? I don't hear Lance. Linda Gunter.
Here.
Margaret Reeder. Margaret Reeder. I don't hear Margaret. Oliver Holly.
Here.
And Vernon Gammon. We do have a quorum. And LGERS board. Dale Falwell. Alan Boansey. Brenda Howerton.
Present.
Thank you. Catherine Truitt. Clee Atkinson. Clee Atkinson. I don't hear Clee. Greg Patterson.
Here.
Homer Dearman.
Here.
Thank you. Jeffrey Morse.
Here.
Thank you. Kevin Gordon. think Kevin was attending. Let's Brewer. Let's. Don't hear Let's. Melody Brady.
Here.
Thank you. Tony Brown. And Vernon Gammon.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hello? Hello?
Hello, can you hear?
Yes. Can you all hear us?
I can.
I can hear you now.
Who joined?
I can't hear.
No, this is Jeff. I lost contact there for a second.
Jeffrey, can you hear us?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I heard another male voice.
This is Homer Dearman.
All right. Thanks, Homer. Okay. And want to congratulate Lynch for being reappointed to the TSERS board. And we've already welcomed Blake. We have an ethics awareness, identification of conflicts, potential conflicts of interest. Members, you have the board materials as well as the agenda. You've had an opportunity to review the agenda. Does anyone present have an actual potential or appearance of a conflict of interest regarding the matters that are before us? Hearing none, we have some statement of economic interest that have been filed. As you know, these SEI evaluations become part of our official meeting minutes. Please review these evaluations. The Ethics Act requires that any conflicts of interest identified in the evaluations be recorded in the meeting minutes so that these evaluation letters will be made part of today's meetings as a periodic reminder of those conflicts that may have been identified by the Ethics Board. Are there any questions regarding the SEIs? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept the meeting minutes of October 28th, 2021. State Board member.
So moved.
Greg makes a motion.
Second.
Second.
Clea Atkinson, second.
Thank you, Sheriff. We have one by John, but we'll get you on the next go round. We have a motion second. Any further discussion regarding the meeting minutes? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Dale Falwell.
Aye.
Blake Thomas. Aye. Catherine Truitt. Dirk German. Aye. Greg good motion. Jeffrey Winstead. Not with us. John got the second. Joshua Smith is not here. Lance Brewer.
Tom, I received an email from Mr. Brewer saying he was having a difficult time logging on. I've just resent him the credentials to to call in.
Thank you. Linda Gunter.
Here. Oh, wait, yes.
Margaret Reeder. I haven't heard Margaret. Oliver Hawley.
Yes.
Vernon Gammon.
Okay. Before we get into the meat of the meeting, let's make sure that people who are trying to join us can join us.
We have the LGERS next.
I know. I just want to say that between now and the next few minutes, let's make sure that everybody who's trying to join us can join. We now would entertain a like motion from board members regarding the approval of the minutes of October 28th.
This is Homer Dearman.
Mr. Brown made the motion, and Homer, if we take yours as a second, please.
Second.
Thank you. Motion second being made. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Dale Folwell.
Aye.
Brenda Howerton.
Aye.
Catherine Truitt. Lee Atkinson.
Aye.
Greg Patterson.
Aye.
Jeffrey Morse.
Aye.
Lance Brewer.
Aye.
Thank you, Lance. Melody Brady.
Aye.
Melody Brady. Thank you.
Aye.
And Bernie Gammon.
Thank you. We'll now have our operational update, which will be presented by Rick Lopez, Director of Member Services, Patrick Kinlaw, Director of Policy Planning, Compliance, and Actuarial Joy, and Sam Watts, our legislative liaison.
Vicki Roberts.
It's on the top of one page.
Yeah,
It's at the bottom of one page on the top of it.
I'm a fan today.
And Vicki Roberts, Director. Okay. Let's get it right. Rick Lopez, Director of Operations. Vicki Roberts, Director of Member Services.
Morning, everybody. Just give you an overview of what's going on in operations. We'll start with retirement processing. We don't show you all the slides just to keep things moving on the highlights. But just so you know, in general, for retirement processing, we do 4 things in just retirements. We do our service audit, make sure the service is reported accurately, and that way nobody gets in trouble later on. Also, we'll do estimate requests and service purchase. Those are things that we don't mention, but they're just as important as the retirement itself, planning for retirement. So I didn't want to speak to that. I don't think we've ever done that. We've got 15 analysts over there that process all of this and 11 QCs. And if you look to the slides, you can see that in December of 2021, this past December, we had 1,025 requests for retirement. That's up from 960 the previous year, December. Our goal to prepare these and send to 6E, which is for the prospective retiree to elect their option. It's 30 days, and we exceeded that this past December with a 23.1 day turnaround time. Something that caught my eye, I look back on in July of 2021. That's always our highest retirement month. This past July, we had 3,327 requests, and that was up from 2,990 the previous year, so roughly 10% off there. Something to keep an eye on. Moving on to the benefits processing, the death notifications. We normally have 7 analysts there on the death team. We currently have 2 vacancies, and we have 1 fairly new employee. It takes about a year to get these people fully trained to process deaths. And so we're currently working overtime. We've had, as you guys have talked about previous meetings, a lot of deaths, a lot of death increase, a lot of notifications. We also work at GDAC and April and a report. Things deaths reported outside of the call. It's a work. And so with that, we have, you can see that our deaths are averaging probably around 1,100 throughout the course of 2021. Notifications. It was down from the previous year.
Could you make sure your computers, your phones are on mute? We're getting feedback.
All right. Our goal from basically the time we get a notification to close out the workflow on that, to process that death notification, state payment out is 45 days. It took us 41.7 days in December. We're still seeing a lot of high volume. We're going to continue to work overtime. We've got 2 new hirees coming on board in the next couple of weeks. We're hoping to get staff fully trained and try to handle that volume. Doesn't really show signs of decreasing anytime soon, unfortunately. We'll keep an eye on it. December is only 1 month. It's promising, and we're hopeful, but we're just trying to stay on top of getting these folks paid as quickly as possible. Next slide for disability applications. We have one supervisor there. We normally have 8 analysts for the disability team. We currently have 2 vacancies, and we have 3 QCs there. Turnover and lost our clinical reviewer, which prepares all of our cases to present to the medical board. And we had one of our physicians retire on the medical board, which we'll hear a little bit about our hopeful replacement later that you guys will give consideration to and vote on. But that group, you can see that we had a little bit of a turnaround time blip there. We did have some illness, and with the small group, we were just trying to hold on that one. We got 230 new disability applications in December of 2021. We do have a lower turnaround time on these. It's 25 days. It took us 32.7 days during that month from the time the application received to actually make the payment if they were deemed eligible for disability. For our refund section, we only have 1 QC in that section. It's pretty remarkable the amount of volume that person handles. She basically we had 1,149 refund requests in December. That was up from 969 the previous year. And she processed all those. So all of our disability analysts also prepared the refund, but she has to QC all of those. We've got 1 person. We do have some backups, but this particular month we had 1 person at least loaded. We processed the entirety of those refund requests. It's pretty remarkable. It's a large volume. For our payroll processing, you can see that we had a big spike there. That was our one-time supplement. That was a huge amount. With that section, it's a really small section, so they get a lot done just with monthly and supplemental payroll. We have 1 manager of a department that manages both that section and our employer reporting section. We have 1 supervisor in that section. They also handle our state health plan, the AMI work. We've got 1 team lead and only 2 payroll specialists. So they get a lot of work done there. There were, December 2021, we processed 344,646 payees, and that total amount was 670 million plus. So lots going on in that section. Had a lot coming at us. We had that one-time COLA supplement, the Social Security, VA COLAs. So lots happening in that section. That section's also taken over handling of our overpayments and overpayment setup. So they do a lot there. I did want to mention something that's not on any of the slides for our fire and rescue folks with the online reporting update. That there's been an outreach. We hired a temporary that works a couple of days a week. And for our fire and rescue fire departments, we have 1,323 listed departments. All those have been contacted, and we've reached 421 have responded and agreed to participate. 51 have declined. Wrapping back around and making calls again and doing some other outreach, email. We're trying everything we can to get everybody signed up and get them online, because what we want to do once we get everyone online is get the online payment set up for these guys to make it as easy as possible. That certainly helps our group, but for processing time and making sure that they can do this, because of the limited time they have to do it, really want to get that going. Rescue squad group had 171 out of 215 are contacted. 23 have responded and agreed to participate. 12 have declined. We've got 10 in process with usernames and passwords being assigned, and we are still trying to do outreach with those guys. So a lot of effort going into taking care of those folks. We really want them to be as much a part of what we do in retirement as anyone else. We have got a lot of positive feedback, and we took that to heart, doing our part to try to make sure that we take care of these guys as quickly as we can. Also, on the next slide, just quickly on the Orbit self-service, you can see we had over 1.5 million retirement estimates conducted over the last 12 months. That may be one person going in multiple times, but that's how many hits we actually had for retirement estimates between December 2020 and December 2021. And then we had over 330,000 beneficiary updates during that same period period. That's actually people logging in and changing their beneficiary, which is real time. It's time, date, stamp. It takes effect immediately, shows up in our line of business system. That's less paperwork, less processing time, less people involved to do it, and it's instant gratification for the member. That's what we want. That's what we're really working toward in these coming years, is to get things out there and in self-service for people to do on their own, so they don't have to wonder where things are in transit through the USPS, where they are with us. And that's all I have. Any questions on anything?
Questions? Rick, I worked with Rick a long time and read people's body language fairly well, and I can tell you that the burdens of COVID as it relates to people getting to work in this building, keeping us in the check delivery business, falls on his shoulders. And that's complicated by the fact that we have more of our state employees than ever who are maybe attempting to retire earlier than ever. Another burden on Rick and his staff. When you have these small groups of 1 or 2s or 3s and you have one outbreak in the building of that, then that sort of puts the whole little department on hold for a while. And then, so I just wanted to publicly acknowledge the effort that you're putting into this. And we know it's serious business. We know that you take your job seriously. And we're very pleased with how you're managing all this. And so I say all that because I don't want you to feel like you're alone. I don't want you to feel like you're doing all this work on behalf of all these invisible people that none of us know personally who are in this system, and that we as a board acknowledge that to you. So.
I just wanted to ask a question because I understand that like it's such a short turnaround when we did give the 2% bonus for this year. And I think it was a real push to try to get it done by the end of the month and get those checks out. And I'd like to, acknowledge my appreciation, but then to have you tell us what you had to do, especially what were you hustling and we want to acknowledge your efforts.
Well, it's I'm sometimes the mule, but these are the brains that make all this happen. And they just it just seems like they're always volunteering and raising their hand to do the toughest jobs, and they don't let anything get between them and their work. It was what Linda just talked about was the fact that the budget was ratified in November, December, and we were trying to get these payments to people, especially as they were facing even higher food bills, gas bills, and utility bills, and doing all this around the holiday with COVID, without COVID is even serious business. This made it all worse. So Rick and his team deserve a lot of credit for that. And just so you'll know, that it's not just that, but there's also W-2 that's impacted by those bonuses. So, and then we try to break records in getting the W-2s out to people as early as possible. So there's always an unintended consequence. So I'd like to lead us in a round of applause for Rick and his team today as a board. One quick question. We were in a meeting yesterday. I thought, so your gross payments here are overstated by the bonus.
Correct.
Normally, we're at about a 570 million run rate. So that's still, we're not at a 680 run rate, right? Because that's a different number. So we're still at about 570 million gross of payments going out every 30 days. But it was exaggerated by the bonus that got added to this, right? Any other questions from any board members?
I did one break test, I know it's state and this is local, but on our first responders, the fire and the paramedics, those that are not wanting to sign up for automate, is there a common theme, i.e.
We
connectivity?
really haven't gotten back, just the, I don't know, well, it's more, I don't really have time for that right now. Maybe I'll do it later. So we intend to call them in the spring and some more outreach.
Let's be clear, those were their words.
Those were their.
Oh, not your words. Not, you didn't have time.
We're gonna keep calling, and we're gonna get our partners to, on the outside to help us with that as well. Firefighters Association guys have indicated that they will also step in and try to nudge some people in that direction.
Okay, that's, I was just curious if it was if there were people with, possible connectivity issues, volunteer fire departments, in Eastern and Western Carolina. If that's an issue, then is that something?
We haven't heard that. That is something I'll make sure that I'm taking Starling on. That's a problem.
Thank you.
Other questions from the phone or from the board? Just draw your attention to the self-service. You're going to be hearing more about this in the spring, but there are a lot of heartbreaking things that go on in this building daily. One is officers killed in the line of duty and other state employees who lose their lives in the line of duty. And so at Master Trooper Horton's funeral, I talked to the Secretary of Crime Control, Justice and Public Safety, and we have got to tighten up the process between the time it takes for us to get a death certificate for those that killed the line of duty and the death. I don't mean to be inelegant about this, but I know that toxology reports are probably an important part of a death certificate. But I don't think these officers were consuming drugs and drinking alcohol when they were ambushed. And we just got to tighten up that process. I mean, the last thing we need to be doing when somebody is faced with this, whether it's be a Goodwin's family or Trooper Horton's family or any other family, is a delay because of some bureaucracy associated with this issue. So I just want to let you know I'm taking this personally. I'm going to be partnering with Sheriff Association, PBA, and any other law enforcement groups, especially, even though anyone can lose their life in the line of duty, to make sure that we don't think anybody should be at the front of the line, but it shouldn't be that difficult to get a death certificate. You should be asking, why does that matter to us? And the reason is, well, with a plan the size of ours, we can't pay a claim until we have a death certificate. Nor should we. So that's why all this ticks and ties. Secondly, we're going to be partnering with Scenic, any of the other stakeholder groups, League, County Commissioners, PBA, and others on this beneficiary update. The second set of stories that we have here are people who die unexpectedly for any reason as a member of this plan, these plans. And they weren't dating at the time. And since their public service, they dated, got married, had children, and they never updated their beneficiaries. So it's not a leap in logic for you to just envision some of these situations where somebody may have put someone down as a beneficiary that they're no longer even really connected to. And it should be no secret, unfortunately, that when it comes to money, that it's, people sometimes change their stripes. And there's nothing the people in this building, including me, can do about that. You do not pick and choose these laws, rules to follow, or to apply, or who to apply them to. And, you know, we've seen situations where two people were going into cadet school and, you know, they were just single and joining the highway patrol or one of these other agencies, and you know, their buddy was going into the cadet school with them and they put each other down as a beneficiary and annuitant. You know, that's just, it's going to get through the paperwork. That has long-term consequences if that something happens to that person. And especially when there's kids involved. And we have a lot of people who have continued to designate their parents as their beneficiaries, even though they're happily married with children. So we're going to put a big push on this in spring, kind of tighten some of this up so we don't have these heartbreaking stories. We're not going to do that until we can make sure that we're over all these hurdles that we're facing just with the number of people dying in our plan, the number of people retiring in our plan. Because we want to make sure when we light that candle to encourage people to check this stuff personally, that we are prepared on this end to take all that. So that's why this self-service chart is so important.
I definitely, we want everyone to update their beneficiaries, and we've had very sad cases, and we want to push for it. Again, when we do have almost 1 million people out there, and if they start sending us forms, they're going back to Rick, and Rick's got a couple people pushing buttons. So self-service, logging on self-service, getting them to do that online as much as we can. We want to push for it, but we also have to pay death benefits. We have to pay retirements. So it's a challenge for us, but we think it's the right thing to do. Too many sad cases, and we try to help as best we can. But like the treasurer said, it is who the person designated as their beneficiary.
Is the vision in automation so that email, or preferably email or text, goes out to the owner of the account annually, requiring them to, in other words, it'll keep texting or emailing weekly until they update it once a year?
That is something we're talking about with our communications team. We put it in annual statements. They go out every year. And that does get attention, but others we may not be connecting with. So we got to figure out ways to connect with everybody, not just the 400,000 people, but all million.
It's not just this agency. DOD had the problem with 2 million service members updating the same, married and kids, and the 10-year-old form still sent all death benefits to the parents and whatnot, or a spouse and all there. But we got to the point where we had to either, before automation, we had to manually update and sign. You just had to initial annually and date it as part of a personnel scrub, which we really can't do at this level. But then when we went automated, we said you get pestered with emails every week until you went in and updated your form. And even if there was no changes, click, no changes. So
Without you violating any of your DOD or me violating my role as state treasurer, in some of these situations, the parent is designee and the parent renounces it, and we're good. But we have other situations where the parent says, I ain't like that person, my child married anyway, so we're not good. I mean, just ex-spouse, excuse me.
Just to be a little careful on that. Yes, someone can renounce a benefit, but that doesn't mean it goes to the spouse or goes to the child. There's other people listed on that form, or then we now don't have a beneficiary. Now it's going to an estate, and so it's not as easy as just the parent will renounce it, and then the parent's just trying to decide who it goes to. That's actually not how it happens. Some of the parents think that, and then it ends up actually more complicated.
So thank you for that. And I know we spent a little extra time on this, but it's a good investment in time to try to take care of this. And we met with Christy and communications team, and obviously it won't be as simple as click it or ticket, or change your fire alarm battery every. We got to do something that has a slogan to it that explains to people how important this is, and check it every year or two.
I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I don't think he asked us. You mentioned, Mr. Cosby, that you send out this information every year. I thought
The annual benefit statement when we produce that, it has the beneficiaries listed. We ask people to check. And those are going to active employees.
Oh, okay, because honestly, I don't get that. I think really retirees need to be the first focus.
Right.
And if you can focus on retirees first, and then you can kind of get in the other people, maybe then you can kind of roll it out. We'd like to be involved too.
Sure.
So count me in.
That'd be great. And so I'm sorry, you were just.
Oh, no. Right. It gets more complicated with retirees because you designate, you pick a benefit option, and then you're locked in when you cash your check. So some benefits you can designate a beneficiary for, some you can't because you've already chosen it. So it gets a little more complicated, but there's no reason to not include the retirees in that as well.
It just seems to be the week for me divulging things in my personal life. So the 401-457 statement that most of us got over the last few weeks, it's actually written right there. And since my mail comes to our home in Winston-Salem, mail. And so that encouraged her to look at one of our life insurance policies. And we had designated her parents when our children were 3, 5, and 7. We designated her parents who are no longer here to get this money. So there's nothing bad. Everything about looking at this is going to be good and virtuous to the long-term benefit of everybody. And as I said, that statement that came in on my 401-457 encouraged Cynthia and my wife to look at other stuff and realize that everything was in order, but then we found this policy over here that was still designated her parents who've been gone for several years. So anyway, thank you.
Well, good morning. So I wanted to give you guys a little bit of an update from the last quarter that we met. We were short-staffed at that time, mainly due to the staffing crisis, of course, everyone's facing. And we still have some of that. And it's also mixed with illness now. But I did want to report that we've been very busy recruiting and hiring and training. And right now we have 7 new hires in training since the last time we met. And we still have a lot of backfills from promotions, retirements, and some of it just because people are looking for other opportunities for themselves. They're leaving. So you'll see that as I go through the numbers in the next few slides. So just wanted to give you an update on that. So the first slide is the production of all of our correspondence coming into the Retirement Systems Division. If you look at the left-hand side of the graph, you see how many, and the right represents the timing in days. And looking at the last quarter of the year, we received more than 15,500 pieces of mail, and we were able to meet our turnaround time with an average of 7 days to respond, which is still a lot longer than normal, but within that goal. We did have to pull from ERG, who normally handles this. We had to pull them to help us with calls, and you'll see a little bit later on that we had over 65,000 calls this past quarter. So we had to pull from everywhere to be able to handle those. The next slide gives you a snapshot of our retirement education meetings. And so far, July through December, we've been able to reach 5,300 people in the first 6 months, and we've had a total of 186 of those retirement planning conferences or meetings. And of course, our successful campaign for the National Retirement Securities Month in October is really what boosted those numbers. So kudos to our communications team. They did a great job. They partnered with Social Security and Prudential. And of course, when you all come together and have a conference, more people are going to attend. So that's something we look forward to doing every year. But we were able to reach a lot of people, so that's good. They're more aware of retirement. On the next slide, it shows scheduled one-on-one retirement counseling appointments. The number to the left of the graph shows how many counseling sessions are represented, and each horizontal line going across the table. The red bar shows how many appointments we actually held each month. We are still doing all of these virtually. We did have for the overall quarter total 691 of those. And that is a decrease in our numbers. I want to be transparent there. We usually have about 160 more appointments. What we did was we had to limit our appointments to 2 people instead of 3 right now, so we could have another resource to help us with telephone calls and emails that are coming in. This next slide shows you emails received and answered. And you'll see from the table that we received over 15,000 this quarter and almost 1,200 more than last quarter. So that's about 5,100 emails a month. And the total turnaround time was about 3.2 days for the quarter. In December, that turnaround time started increasing as we got more and more emails in due to the holidays. You know, when we're not here, people still send emails. So if we come back and we have 1,000 emails that came in during a holiday break, and we're having a really hard time trying to get those caught up. But it rose to 4 days turnaround time, and right now, due to the holidays, we're right at 6 or 7 days to respond to those emails with the staff that we have. And of course, when it takes that long, you're getting those emails again and again. And if they don't get a response, they're calling. So it's that vicious cycle that makes our numbers go up. This next slide shows you the average speed of answer. That's how long it took us to actually answer the phone call. And on the left, you see the time represented in minutes and seconds. If you add up the average speed of answer for the entire quarter, you'll see that it took about 15 minutes on average to answer those calls last quarter. Of course, that clearly shows our staffing struggles. I can tell you that January, we start our peak period, and it's a lot higher now. Yesterday, it was about, I have it on my phone. I think it was about 30 minutes average to answer the phone. We've had as much as 196 calls in queue because it's payday and we're struggling with staffing right now. We continue to work with our communications manager to put information out on our website as well as on social media. She told me yesterday that what we put out there as our trending topics has been the most active in history so far. People asking questions and getting the information they need. We've also updated that information on our voice response system so people hear it as soon as they call in. But some people want to hold for an hour just to talk to us. So we do still have calls. Our average speed of answer is going up, and I just wanted you guys to know that if you hear somebody, you'll have the information now to share with them. We're doing everything we can, pulling everybody we can. We've got people in training, and we're hesitant to pull them out of training because that just delays them being able to answer the majority of our calls. Right now, they're trained to handle 3 different things. So we put them on the phone. They may handle 15 calls versus the 300, more calls that come in that day that they can't handle. So we're trying to keep them in training right now so that by the end of February, beginning of March, they'll be available and it's still our peak period. The next slide is our last slide that we'll go over today, and this shows incoming calls and abandoned calls. I think I already told you we had over 65,000 calls this last quarter, October through December. We abandoned over 34% of those calls. That means the people hung up before we could get to them. So, some people hold for an hour. Some people may only have 15 minutes to hold. So 34% we were able to abandon during that time. We do have our staff working extra hours. We're asking if they have any ideas. Our frontline staff continues to get positive escalations daily, even though we're dealing with all of this, and I'm very grateful for that. I think for the majority, people understand what we're going through. There are occasional few when we get an irate customer or someone escalating, and that's understandable. But luckily, our positive escalations outweigh those, so we get those few and far between. That's it for my report. Unless you guys have some questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Just a couple of things. Vicki has she has we moved some staff over to the call center. We moved some staff into her educational retirement group. And shifted some duties around, knowing that they needed the additional help. the retirement systems division got 8 additional positions. 4 of them were for the call center, and so we're trying to work on how we get those positions funded because we didn't get any funding that went with those, and so working with internally on what we're going to do. But she has and her team, kind of reorganized. They did lose the positions. There's a lot of opportunities now, promotions that have occurred, which are good. But then her backfilling those positions and actually getting the staff up to speed, trained, and those additional 4 positions. All of that is going to help us. Plus, I was telling her, so I was looking at the stats, and after in a conversation with her and her supervisor, this month it looks like it's going to be one of the top months we've ever had for calls. And so a lot of that has to do with the pension supplement the treasurer had mentioned earlier, trying to get those payments out. But we have retirees who they don't understand that this was one time. Your payment in January went back down, so they're calling. They want to know why. They want to know where their money is. They want to know where their 1099s are, their tax forms. And so our normal busyness on top of our staffing issues, and then the one-time pension supplement has become this storm for the retirement systems division, and all of us taking calls and escalations, and her trying to figure out how to shift staff around. And we, and the challenge is you don't want to necessarily take people out of processing death benefits or retirements when those are up. And so we're dealing with the staff we have, and we're trying to. At our meeting yesterday, we're trying to see if we can become inventive. Is there something else we can do to help? And so I just wanted to say that we're working on it. We don't find this is not the way we want to operate, and so I just we're trying to see what we can do. If anybody has any, if you hear anybody that needs any assistance, we'll do what we can as managers and the directors to help out. So, and I just wanted to say that we have the challenge in operations, and which bleeds over into member services.
It does, which is one, we talked about the beneficiary campaign, and we definitely want to do that. We agree. We're trying really hard to get staffed up, because even if we have it online, they're going to call for passwords or help with self-service to start with. So Rick and I work very closely together and try to do what makes sense. Of course, we don't want to send them all out, then they have to wait 3 hours to get through to us, because that would just anger them. So we'll continue to work together. We'll continue to work daily and diligently on getting our staffing situation underway.
Just a couple quick questions. So where are y'all now with all the additional resources you've been throwing into it to what is going to look like fully staffed when you get these full positions funded?
Well, right now we have about 34 people trained for all of member services. Once they're trained, we'll have 41. If we get our legislative positions filled, we should have right around 50. We do have a couple exceptions. We have some people out on short-term disability that we can't really count in our head count. We have a couple people who came to our department from another department that still needs to be trained, that's not in training yet. So we'll be closer to 50, and that should be enough to be able to handle the volume. We're just not there right now.
And then just one follow-up. When you're looking at the issue that's led you to be at 34 right now, are you seeing it as a retention issue? Is it a recruiting issue? Is it both? And if there are retention issues, what are you hearing in exit interviews about the reason why people are leaving?
I don't always see the information on why people are leaving. A lot of people, when we came back, left. Some people have gotten better opportunities. Other employers are calling their old employees, asking them, if you come back, we'll give you this. They're looking for people too. The staffing crisis is real everywhere. I mean, Starbucks is closed when you want to drink, and I think that's a big issue. I also think that we've actually had some great stories. People have left here, but they're going for better opportunities. So, or the career path that they wanted to go down. I mean, I don't want to say better opportunities, because I feel like we have a great place to work with great benefits, and I don't ask them, they don't tell me every detail, but what we're getting when the people talk to us it's been mainly good things. Some are retiring, which is a wonderful thing, and we celebrate it. We've had quite a few of those, right?
Well, and work from home, the ability to work from home
Some people are
permanently has been one of the big things. I know even operations, we've heard that folks about working from home. And so
some of our very first people who left, that was the reason to get, their employers would offer that because they know that is another benefit, especially for maybe a single mom or something. But recently, it's been mainly promotions. There are still some opportunities to work from home, but career advancement is a good thing in my opinion. So we do have a higher turnover rate, but we also, compared to a real call center, we're really more of a counseling center, but compared to a real call center, our attrition is actually good. We have people that stay for years, and typical call center is 1 to 2 years. So, sorry, Rick. Were you saying something?
Well, we're going to have the new phone system too, and that has a lot of potential tools that we'll be able to use, including chat. Obviously, it'll be a slower implementation, limited staff, training, all the things that go into a new system. But we are going to have some more tools at our disposal, which we'll hopefully be able to implement. I think those things will help. I know you guys have probably been online with someone in a chat about something you needed. Likely that person that's helping you might have 2 or 3 windows, might have 2 or 3 customers they're helping. So there's potential there, and we're certainly going to look at that. And that we were told by IT that may come to us as soon as June of this year. So if everything falls into place, we might have those tools soon.
Is that an OST specific new phone system or a statewide?
That's statewide.
Okay.
Yeah, they did a demo for us. It's a great system. One of the problems that Big View Group has is when we have things like the one-time supplement, we have to put in a ticket to change anything in the IVR. We can't simply go in there and just say, hey, let's just key something, and that's what they're going to use. Well, this new system, on the fly, she'll be able to message and make that IVR, to tailor that IVR to this particular situation. It's going to be very helpful.
It's a statewide. We had nothing to do with the procurement, RFP, or anything about the requirements or technology.
but we did,
But the requirements.
yeah, we did work with them on requirements we wanted. But yes, it's coming to all the call centers first, and then it's actually going to be all of our phones as well.
Questions?
The different state agencies have a choice. They can either go with it or not, but it's better for either around the same cost or even less.
Yes, it's more. There are more features and the cost is less.
Good. Any other questions? The other thing that wasn't mentioned is that through no fault of our own, our landlord informed us 6 or 7 months ago that we needed to vacate the Red Oak building, which is where our NC Cash department is. They have a tenant who wants to take the entire building, which includes the 4,500 square feet that NC Cash occupies. And so we've been doing construction in this building to try to get those employees from NC Cash over here. And part of that is busting out some walls in the call center and making room for these 30 employees, 4,500 square feet. So in addition to everything you've heard about call center and member services, there's also been a lot of sawing and hammering and banging going on, and a lot of dust flying, which has also disrupted the call center. But we're hopefully in the 7th inning of that. Next.
Good morning, everybody, and good morning to those on the phone. My name is Patrick Kinlaw. I'm the Director of Policy, Planning, and Compliance here at the Retirement Systems. Our team works to sustain the long-term health of the retirement systems. And I just wanted to say at the outset, I've said this before, but what an honor it is to work with Vicki and Rick as leaders and with their teams. You've heard a lot this morning about how they've been working through a lot of volume with staffing challenges. But as the person in my role, I just want to say how they continue to do all that and their teams continue to do all that with maintaining the emphasis on quality work and putting in all the hard work that's necessary to respond to all these requests, while all at the same time trying to have an eye on improving processes and working together across teams. We're continuing to learn a lot through this time, and it's just an honor to work with them. I do have a number of brief updates for you this morning, just a number of things, different things from the compliance and policy worlds. One of them is on the slides, and the others will not be. On page 17 of the presentation, you see an update on the contribution-based benefit cap provisions. This is what's commonly known as the anti-pension spiking law that became effective in January of 2015. Since that time, you can see that there's been 454 retirements that have led to additional contributions being required from employers. That's 175 from the local system and 279 from the state system. That's an average of about 65 retirements per year in total. During that time, the retirement systems have invoiced more than $43 million to employers and collected about $35 million of that. The other items not on the slides, but just wanted to report on. The first is our decennial administrative rules review. Our staff is in the midst of that process, and that's a required review process on a 10-year cycle for state agencies and boards that have made rules in the North Carolina Administrative Code. Those rules have to be reviewed, and there has to be a decision whether to take action such as revising the rule, repealing it, keeping it, expire. And the retirement systems rules will need those actions to occur by the end of this calendar year. We anticipate bringing recommendations to the boards at the next meeting in April about the disposition of all 99 currently applicable rules that require review. The next update is on the state's annual comprehensive financial report. So that report was published since our last meeting by the Office of the State Controller. The report is lengthy, as many of you will be aware. The materials do not include the report itself, but they include a link to it, and it's available on our public website. In particular, these boards might be interested that note number 12 of the report describes the effect of retirement benefits on the state's financial reporting as of June 30th, 2021. And there are several tables in what's called the required supplemental information sections that have to do with the retirement systems. Our staff provided information to assist the State Controller's Office in preparing that report. And if you do have any questions, we'll be glad to answer them or direct you to the right source. Our next item is on a report that is in your materials in the appendix, which is a report from the actuarial firm Gabriel Roeder Smith, or GRS. The Office of the State Auditor engaged GRS to conduct a review of the actuarial assumptions and methods and processes used by Kavanaugh McDonald for the retirement systems, and by Siegel Consulting for the retiree healthcare benefits. The document in the meeting materials is GRS's report on those items, and we were pleased to see that GRS found that the work was performed in accordance with actuarial standards of practice. They also found that the assumptions and methods used in the valuation were reasonable. One thing that I thought was notable was that as far as the rate of investment return assumption, which is 6.5% per year, GRS describes that assumption as being, quote, near the top of the range we would consider to be reasonable. Many of you will recall that about a year ago, these boards made the decision to reduce that assumption from 7% to 6.5%. And the way I would interpret GRS's report is saying that decision was necessary. That by reducing from 7.5% to 6.5%. That assumption is now at a place that is near the top of the range they would consider reasonable. GRS also made a few recommendations about improvements to disclosures and the valuation reports, which we passed along to the consultant. While on the topic of the consulting actuaries, we have discussed in a previous meeting that the department has issued a request for proposals, or RFP, for an actuarial firm to provide consulting services for an 8-year period, which is roughly calendar years 2022 through 2029. The procurement process is still ongoing and is still in the silent period. Meanwhile, the department has extended the contract with Kavanaugh McDonald Consulting for a 90-day period while the RFP process continues. Another item in your board materials is a memo on reemployment earnings. Some retirees of the state and local system are later reemployed by an employer in the same retirement system in a job that does not require them to be earning service in the retirement system. For example, this could be part-time work or temporary or contractual work. These retirees can earn compensation up to a certain limit every 12 months before their pension benefit would be suspended for the rest of the 12 months. The earnings limit increases every year based on inflation, and there's a memo from Thomas Causey attached to your materials that describes the increase in this limit that's effective for 2022. Of course, just as to remind you, in order to retire in the first place, the employee cannot have any prearrangement to come back and work for the employer or any other employer in their retirement system, and they must observe a waiting period after their retirement. A few more items that are specifically related to the state board. The first is an update on Alamance Community School. This is a charter school that the board approved their participation in TSERS as an employer at the board's July meeting, contingent on the school providing and staff approving a financially sound audit report for the school's first year of operation. The school did provide that the financial statements and other materials on October 26th. Staff has reviewed those materials, and they do establish that the school obtained an unmodified or clean audit opinion with no material weaknesses and no significant deficiencies. The auditor identified no material weaknesses in internal controls and no instances of non-compliance with aspects of operating a major state program. Staff has reviewed these materials and approved them, and accordingly, the contingency of the board's approval has been removed, and the school will continue as a participating employer. Another update on a charter school is Casa Esperanza Montessori Charter School in Raleigh, or actually in Wake Forest, I believe. Perhaps it's Raleigh. They have withdrawn from the retirement system. We've reported to the board in previous meetings that they had expressed their intent to withdraw, and that was all but final, pending their payment of a withdrawal liability, which exceeded $2.8 million. The school did pay that withdrawal liability in December, and therefore they've withdrawn from the system. Their employees will still be entitled to benefits they earned up to the effective date of their withdrawal, and any other benefits that they might earn with other employers who participate in TSERS, for instance, if they go to work for a local education agency. However, they will not earn any additional pension or other benefits as a result of work they perform at Casa Esperanza in the future. Final item to report to you is a difficult matter affecting 35 of our disabled members. As you might recall, one of the things that the compliance unit does is to research cases and patterns where it's evident that benefits may not have been administered exactly as required by statute. This could result in individuals being overpaid or underpaid. Either way, it's our responsibility to correct the payment. In the situation where benefits have been overpaid, the retirement systems have a statutory obligation to pursue full recovery of the overpayment. There's a requirement of statute that in order to qualify for long-term disability LTD benefits paid by the Disability Income Plan of North Carolina, an individual must have earned 5 years of membership service in the state system within a particular 8-year or 96-month period. Individuals who did not have 5 years of membership service within their relevant 96-month period are not eligible for LTD benefits or for the payment toward healthcare premiums that goes along with that. Unfortunately, a review completed by our office in 2021 determined that 35 individuals over a span of 14 years, 2007 through 21, were approved for LTD benefits when they did not meet the requirement of having 5 years of service within their 96-month period. As a result, over a period of 14 years, the disability plan paid about $3 million in ineligible benefits, including $2 million in LTD income benefits and about $1 million in premiums to the state health plan. As individuals have been confirmed to be a part of this group, they have been contacted by letter and by phone if possible. They've been informed of the finding that they had been ineligible and that their benefits would be discontinued. They have been informed of the amount of the overpayment of benefits and the methods that are available for repaying. Finally, they've been advised about their eligibility to apply for a refund of contributions or to retire if they're eligible for that. Some members have appealed the division's decisions and received a final agency decision letter detailing the review. Some members have initiated litigation about these findings, which is ongoing. The review that resulted in these findings related to nearly 6,000 LTD recipients whose benefits were initially approved over a 30-year time frame from 1991 to 2021. So therefore, out of all the cases that were part of this review, about 0.6% of the approvals were found to be erroneous because the individuals had not earned 5 years of membership service within a 96-month period. Staff has considered possible causes that could have contributed to these errors and clarified the business rules that are used in an effort to prevent this kind of mistake from occurring again in the future. That concludes my report.
Questions?
I just had one follow-up on the, Mr. Kinlock, you mentioned that the report from GRS noted that 6.5% was on the high end of the acceptable range. And it noted on that report on page 30 that that was assuming no change in the asset allocation. Could you speak for me a little bit about the impact of the asset allocation on the appropriateness of this actuarial factor, and maybe about the work that y'all are doing on the investment side with the asset liability study that's going on, I think, right now?
I'm not in the best position to speak to the asset liability study. The general theoretical connection between the assumption and investment allocations is that basically the risk return trade-off. So there's theory that the more risky the investments are in certain types of classes, the higher the expected rate of return should be over the long term. And the less risky, the lower it should be. We've talked, when the board set this assumption at 6.5% a year ago, we talked about how North Carolina has historically been near the lower end of the distribution of other states, and that's because the investment allocation has been less risky on average than that of other states. That's the connection. You know, the way I interpreted GRS's statement was that if there was a change in the asset allocation, that they might certainly have a different range of what they consider to be reasonable.
Follow up.
Go on, please.
As we said, not only in this meeting, but in other meetings, that for a very long period of time, our plan has not hit its assumed rate of return, actually on average for about 22 years. And there are three people who have generally been the treasurer during that period of time. Treasurer Harlan Bowles, who wore the lapel pin, So when he left office, the plan was 110% funded. It had every dollar, it needed 10 cents on top of that. And as soon as Treasurer Moore was elected, through no fault of his, our country was attacked on 9/11. The stock market was closed. The plan had a drawdown of several $1 billion, which Blake's very familiar with. And then all during Treasurer Moore's tenure, they worked to get the plan back up to a decent funded level. And as soon as Treasurer Cowell became the treasurer, she was hit with a great financial crisis, which she also had nothing to do with. And so we are where we are. On top of that, as you know, these three blessings of low interest rates and earlier retirements and longer life expectancies are all great in our individual lives, but they put tremendous levers inside of this plan that aren't so apparent to the naked eye. And lastly, for much of the life of this plan, there's been a lot of emphasis on risk reward or risk and return. And I take responsibility for the fact that there's another player in this game, and that is the funders, the people who are asked to put the money in, starting with the General Assembly, and most importantly with the local government units. Generally speaking, we ask the local government units to increase their contributions to these plans. They have but for one place to go, and that is property taxes. They don't have a lot of levers at the local level. So we can, and I'm sure we will have theoretical debates about asset liabilities. We got a new study coming in, but the fact is there is a tremendous amount of pressure, especially on local government units, from many parts of North Carolina that are not as prosperous as Wake County is, to how are they going to keep up funding this plan. So for every conversation I have as the state treasurer, not enough COLA or not enough this or not enough that, there's a whole nother set of conversations going on about we just don't know if we can afford this plan going forward, and we need to make some fundamental changes to these systems. So none of you asked me to say those words. I just wanted to take an opportunity to give you a broader picture about what's happening here. And it's no secret that when the stock market roars ahead, that we don't do as well as other plans do. And when the stock market collapses, we do better than other plans do. And one of the double-edged swords of being well-funded is that it requires more energy. It's like being in good physical shape. The better physical shape you're in, the more effort you got to put in to stay in that physical shape. This pension plan's no different. When you're in South Carolina and you're 63% funded, or Kentucky, one of the 30% funded plans, you have no choice but to swing for the fences. Because that's your choice. So the better you are, the harder it is to stay good. So as I said, nobody asked me to say those comments, but I think it's very important to look at. As far as the 6.5% rate of return, contrary to what other people have said, and Blake sort of intimated about this, I've gone back through papers that are on my desk. Many of you who have seen the papers on my desk, and realized that there's been suggestions to lower the assumed rate of return on this plan long before I was ever here, maybe for over a decade. Actuaries had recommended this. And I believe I'm the only first treasurer in 61 years who's ever actually done it. And we've done it now 4 times. But we try to do it in partnership with the funders, the General Assembly, and the local government units. And the lowering the assumed rate of return, which you've done for 4 years, has very little to do with the asset allocation model or how conservatively or how speculatively our plan is managed. It has a lot to do with just telling the truth about what the future might look like. For us to assume something that hasn't happened in the last 22 years that's going to continue to happen the next 22 years is Pollyannish. Last thing I'll say about that. Another kind of perverse way of thinking. The better funded your plan is, and you lower the assumed rate of return, which hasn't really been done in 60 years, the harder it is to lower your assumed rate of return. Best funded plans, mathematically, it's harder for them to do that. And the reason is that the not well-funded plans make these proposed announcements about lowering their assumed rate of return, but then they don't fund the plan. We actually lower the return and fund the plan. And it may not matter to people in this room, except unless you care about public education, public safety, public works, or public roads. The rating agencies see right through this. They see that we're trying to do the right things and we're funding it. And it makes a big difference. It may make a big difference going forward as far as the benefit of the doubt of our bond rating, which in turn gives us lower costs of capital. So anyway, thanks for hearing all that. But yes.
Can I just respond to your follow-up? Just 2 points to respond to that. First about the rate of return. Before coming in, I did go to the investment performance reports from Treasurer's office, and I saw that the 20-year return there is listed as 7.1%.
Finally.
Yes, so we are above 6.5% right now. That assumed rate of return over the last 20 years. But I guess just more broadly, it doesn't take a genius to see that there may be a motion that comes before this board in the next year to lower that assumed rate of return again, given what GRS put in the documents. I think what was maybe previewed at the last meeting. And if that comes, I think I just ask that the board be involved in understanding how asset allocation plays a role in that process. I noted in the asset allocation documents that are before the investment retirement, the investment board, that it assumes their calendar, your consultant assumes a 10-year expectation of 5.8% with this asset allocation. But if the plan were in a growth asset allocation, it would assume 6.75% as the return. So there is an impact there. And I think that this board, we are fiduciaries. And I think that's a thing that we just need to talk about and understand how that plays into everything else here.
And I would offer that it's not my intention to be thinking about or presenting to this board the further lowering of the assumed rate of return. I think for something that hadn't been done in 60 years to have done 4 and 5 years, people are, so I can almost assure you that that's not something I'm intending to do. The second thing that you brought up is something that can be discussed. But just when you look at those rates of returns, those are in the rearview mirror, and things aren't going so well this year. So you can always take a snapshot or Polaroid and create some narrative. But as I said earlier, and I've been overly generous and overly kind to previous state treasurers about the fact that they were responding to something they had no control over, which is 9/11 and the great financial crisis. But preserving and strengthening this plan, sustaining it, is taking on an entire new meaning. And interest rates have never been this low. People have never retired this early, and people have never lived this long. And there's nothing emotional or political about that. So as we go forth, and be glad to entertain any thoughts on these subjects, but let's just keep it mathematical and not political and not emotional. Thank you. Thank you all. Now we have our right behind my phone. So, Sam Watts.
Thank you for having me here to discuss this with you. I do want to just, if I can piggyback on the previous conversation, just mention that the board by statute reviews the assumptions every 5 years. Because the extraordinary circumstances review it several times within a number of years. But reiterate what the treasurer mentioned, there's no plan, nothing in place that get us to do an interim review of those assumptions. We will monitor and continue to monitor the same information that's before GRS, and we're looking very carefully at the ALM study that is ongoing, paying very close attention to what the funders need for us to do to sustain the plan. In fact, that's really why I'll explain my problem a little better last time. This was after the market crash in 2008. This was a very, very important book because it chronicles 800 years of financial folly. Because preceding every crash, someone has always figured out that, well, nothing's going to happen this time because we beat the system. We figured out how to never have an economic downturn again. And that's simply not true. In fact, what I was going to go into with this is that 8 to 15 years ago, there were a lot of thinkers, policymakers, and policymakers worried about defined benefit plans, state retirement systems in particular, and local government systems, because of two basic assumptions: that people would forget the basic laws of economics, that you do have to take into account that it's going to happen again. You're going to have another crash at some point. Or that there wouldn't be political will, that even if you remembered that there wasn't going to, that there is going to be another crash, there wouldn't be political will to make a plan and stick to it. And that's what we began during the previous administration, and have continued and stayed on our course, both with what this board has called the state ECRISP and the local government ECRISP. And they function a little differently because of the budget needs of the employing agencies. The General Assembly ECRISP essentially adds a planned escalation each year as a minimum. Since it can handle more volatility, there's additional contribution right above that should the plan need to respond quickly. Local governments don't have as much appetite for flexibility because their primary funding source is property tax and local sales tax, which they have not a lot of control over, but the property tax is the one they have control over. And so they need less volatility. So the local ECRISP has been developed and refined and tweaked to make that to keep local governments on path to sustain the local system, just the way the General Assembly wants to sustain the state system. But that does require a lot of discipline. And this was all a lead in to make 2 points with you. The General Assembly, with the budget that ran quite a bit later than normal this year in December, has expressed that they have no real desire to rethink the second year of their biennium. So they did a 2-year budget. They set the retirements, the pension supplements for retirees in both years at the same time. It's a very expensive proposition. They had full consideration of whether they could afford to add a COLA. Essentially what they did was they said, well, we're going to stick to our Egress and we're going to put additional money into the TSERS retirement system each month over the 12-month period. But we're going to have the retirement system pay out the bonus in 1 month. So they put it, we paid it out in December. So for the next 6 months, we'll be collecting money back from employing units to pay for that bonus in December over and above what the required contribution rate for the retirement system was. So the money is not coming out of the system. The General Assembly is sticking to its decision to stay on course, to keep the plan open, to keep the plan funded, and respond to the basic laws of economics that for 800 years people periodically forget. With the local system, the proposal you have later today in front of you is a 2% one-time bonus that we paid out of the retirement system. There's been a lot of treasurer said told us to go sharpen the pencils, go check everything twice, 3 or 4 times before he would make a recommendation to you. So he's made his recommendation to you that we're sent to all of you, at least publicly, in favor of that 2% one-time supplement, because it was within what we believed could be feasible and still stick to the Egress plan. But we did have to wait until we knew what the calendar year returns were for last year and what all the pieces were. And it's a one-time decision on a 1-year basis, because we don't know, we don't have all the same pieces in the puzzle to look at another year down the road. You know that we believe that it's a reasonable decision for this year, and there's a need for retirees to have that pension supplement paid to them because of inflation, because of the general state of the economy. So that is the Treasurer's recommendation. It is within the parameters of what we believe is a responsible action. And it is cognizant of that this entire, what is now a 8 to 10 year effort to fix things. The Treasurer was correct. The first actual recommendation to lower the assumed rate of return was based on the 1999 valuation, which would have been I presented this board in October of 2000. And the board chose to wait and take another look at it. And then 2001 happened. It was feasible to fund it at that point. So it is something we are trying to stick to our knitting on, if you will. Those are the big items on the benefit enhancements that are in front of you. Now, that being said, there are 2 other smaller items that are in your package for consideration related to the National Guard Fund and the Fire and Rescue Fund options that cost less than a total of $1 million, and it would be a General Assembly decision to do that. Essentially, our communication with the appropriation staff and they don't want to rethink the big things, but there will be some technical adjustments and things that are small enough to fall within the possibility of being considered within those technical adjustments. So that's that. We'll make a brief comment on that. I was listening very closely when Rick was presenting to you the operations update, and I want to make sure that one thing that was an undercurrent of what he was saying really registers. And that's, we don't have a lot of extra people laying around or sitting around working on these items. He's working on very small teams doing very large operations with a lot of money and a lot of risk and a lot of effort. They do tremendous work. And so we're very grateful that the General Assembly authorized us to have 4 more positions for Rick's team and 4 more positions for Vicky's team. And we're working very hard to fund those. As you can see, we literally are very thin. We're not, there's no really, we're cut to fund those. So they did give us the authority to be flexible with cuts across the entire Department of State Treasurer in order to fund the need that we needed, both in the retirement system and the local government commission, and in the accounting section. So that's a piece of the legislative report. But even though they're really thin staff, we're thin on staffing numbers, I will tell you, our people really do care about what they do every day. One story I wanted to share with you, we had a legislative staff member who used to work for the retirement division. Hear a story about a former state employee. They were having a very difficult financial time in their family. He just knew who to call here and knew former colleagues. He said, "Is this person? Can you guys take a look at this?" We can't give the information back to him, but they said take a look and call him. Well, it turned out that she and her husband were in a difficult situation, and she was eligible to retire 5 years ago, and was unaware that we had a benefit here that we could be paying her $700 a month plus her health insurance. So it was quite a blessing that we had someone who was alert enough and called our folks and made it happen for that person. So that's the level of care our people go to. They really want to help people and solve problems. Other than those cheery notes, there is a very detailed memo that I will admit Patrick did most of the work on, or almost all the work on, in fact, all the work, but about the 19 pieces of legislation affecting the retirement system that were enacted by the General Assembly this year. And happy to answer questions about any of that or any of the other topics I've thrown out for you.
Any questions?
I'd like to make a comment, if I could, Treasurer, since we're on the subject of economics and returns. First, I'll say this is Greg's opinion. We need to be very careful when we look at averages for investment returns. That's just a small piece of what that's just one lever. Quick example, if you have a investment that goes up in value, goes down in value 20%, the next year it goes back up, your average is 0, but you're still 4% behind. It takes a 25% return to make up a 20% loss. So the investment averages are important, but it's also important what are our sequence of returns, what years are we up, what years are we down. And it's also important to look at the volatility or the standard deviation of the portfolio. So the portfolio has a much lower volatility, which results in a lower average, but we don't have as much to make up in the down years.
Great point. Thank you, Greg. Any other comments? I would add one comment to what Greg said, and that is that I know we're running behind, but our spigot cannot be turned off. Across the precipice of the number of people paying into the plan are now less than those that aren't. Probably happened 3 years ago. And I was just going back once again through some of my old stuff sitting on my desk. And just a year and a half ago, for example, I believe it was Duke University who stopped making contributions to their 401k as a match. 4 other major universities. I mean, these things that other folks can do in the downturn, we can't do. Our spigot we're not an endowment. So if things go bad, we can just turn down the retirement benefits. Not only we can't turn them down, but they're actually turning up because of the sheer number of retirees. So I think it's important when you look at risk and return that you look at the spigot. And our spigot is flowing, will continue to flow, and with the number of retirees, it's going to flow even wider and deeper going forward. So, all right, thank you, Sam. Lance, Lance for every choice.
He did.
Hey, Lance.
Coach, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, good morning. I'd like to relay from our IAC meeting as of November 17th to review the third quarter of 2021. To begin the meeting, Jeff Smith and Chris Morris were able to join us to present the performance update on behalf of the division. Chris reported to us that total assets under management at the end of quarter three rose $1.4 billion to a total of just over $172 billion. The majority of this increase was represented by large non-pension deposits into the cash management program for counties and municipalities. Chris went on to report that in regards to the asset allocation, there were no major changes from quarter two to quarter three. At the end of quarter three, the portfolio remained 8% underweight to growth, largely attributed to the underweight in public equity. The portfolio was 9.7% overweight to rates and liquidity. It's also updated that there was a slight underweight to inflation-sensitive and diversifiers of 1.5%, consistent to prior quarters, and was on target with our multi-strategy approach. For quarter three, return of total portfolio was up roughly 0.5%, with equity markets slightly negative and fixed income flat. Our alternative investments, including private equity, were particularly strong in quarter three and allowed the portfolio to overcome the loss in the quarter from our other sectors. Chris, the committee threw a slide comparing the performance results of the retirement system to that of its peers. In strong markets, we expected to lag our peers due to less equity exposures as compared to our peers and more fixed income assets. However, in failing markets, we continue to outperform significantly. In reviewing the risk, we continue to be at the lowest percentile of risk versus our peers. Jeff took over the presentation, elaborated on the asset class performance. He spoke to the return of the calendar year asset class, highlighting growth with a strong one-year performance in public equity of just under 28% and private equity of just above 57%. Double digits for most others, adding value. Jeff discussed new and incremental investments, a lot of new commitments in private equity and inflation sensitive. Completed another platform commitment, leveraging weighting and collaboration across the three asset classes. Also allowed us to take advantage of better negotiation and rates. Asset allocation history, which experienced no material changes, and the top 20 investment managers presentation, noting that two internally managed portfolios actually have increased to 53% of the total portfolio versus 52% in previous quarters. Thus, continue our efforts to reduce expenses where possible. In regards to our fixed income allocation, Brett Hall reviewed the short-term income portfolio. Current average maturity there is 1 year, down from 1.3 years. We continue to anticipate volatility in the rates, and the Fed continues to control inflation. The group has been reinvesting and redeploying assets in a low-rate environment. As a result, the short-term income fund rate has declined somewhat. Jeff presented the core fixed income product for us. He stated the fixed income has pulled back on overweights to get closer to targets and has outperformed in all measured time periods. The fixed income asset class outperformed by 70 basis points, driven by short duration relative to the benchmark. There were no material changes to allocation, and the yield curves are at that time were flat. And regarding our opportunistic fixed income portfolio, Ron Funderburg presented and his team discussed the portfolio's history, structure, performance, capital preservation, and making attractive absolute returns may be in conflict at times, but we feel we've been able to achieve these goals over a long period of time. That portfolio is underweight by 1.2%, which is that trend will continue over the next year. Ron stated that we plan to continue to address this underweight with new commitments. And Treasurer, that concludes my report. Admittedly, this information is dated, giving us all third quarter stuff, and a great deal of market volatility has continued over the past 3 or 4 months. But accepting those limitations, I'll conclude my report. I'm glad to take any questions.
Any questions? Thank you, Lance, and thank you, Greg, for also serving on that IAC board. With that, we'll jump right into Larry and Wendy from Kavanaugh McDonald Consulting to bring us our ADAC projections for the state system. They've become accustomed to talking fast, so.
Morning, Mr. Treasurer, members of the board, Larry Langer and Wendy Ludbrook from Kavanaugh McDonald Consulting. We're delighted to be here. We were just here 3 months ago to talk through the actual valuations, give an update on where rates are headed for the year between July 1, 2022. And we're already back. And the reason we're back is several years ago, staff and the board got in the habit of taking the results from the last valuation and seeing what type of update we could have if we modeled in the returns from the calendar year that just ended. So you get some sort of sense as to what the valuations that are presented in October might show. And that's what we're here showing right now. Investment return tends to be the biggest driver of changes in the funded status and contributions to the plans year in, year out. And it's relatively easy for us to model that. And that's why we're here today. So the slide 2, the projections here. This is very similar to the projection elements from the October board meetings with a couple notable twists, but valuation interest rate of 6.5% is used for all years, including the direct rate smoothing. Investment return 9.6% is what we're estimating, what was given to us as an estimate during calendar year 2021. We baked that into the projections. And then all the other elements of the Egress, including the 0.35% of pay increase year after year after year. There's 2 other deterministic projections, that last bullet point of the slide number 2. One is based on assumptions in the baseline projection, including 6.5% return for all years, but it includes the one-time supplements provided for December 2021 and October 2022, including the payment back towards those supplements, and the other one with the supplements, but including the 9.6% investment return. So that's underlying these projections. Wendy's going to take it from slide 3.
All right, so for those of us that are visual learners, this is the full version of what Larry just said. So if you look on the graphs, there are 4 graphs here, although it kind of looks like there are only 3 because 2 of them are very similar to one another. If you see the blue line that's trending down, and then on top of that blue line, there are little gray circles. So the gray circles are the baseline projection. So that's the projection that we did back in October with the information that we had in October. Since then, we've had 2 changes, 2 developments in the plan that we're now modeling on top of that to see what the impact of those two changes would be. The first one is the supplements that were approved with the state budget legislation. The first one was paid out in December, and then the second one will be paid out this coming October. And this, you can see that the impact on the funded on the contribution rate is relatively small, even though it is a substantial amount of money that was paid out. But as Sam talked about a little bit ago, the contributions went out, and but the money's
coming in. So the contribution rates were increased in order to cover the amount of money that was being paid out with the supplement. But there's a slight disconnect in the timing. In December, the lump sum essentially of payments went out, but the contributions that are going to come in to cover that will come in over a couple months, and so we have slight timing differences. And the same thing with the October one. A lump sum will go out in October, but the contributions coming in to cover that will be paid out over a period of time. And so those slight timing differences is really what causes the difference in the projected contribution rates. And you can see that they're really essentially the same, but just slightly different. Then the line that's below that, the green line, that then takes the supplement projection and also incorporates the 9.6% return for 2021. And you can see that additional return of 3.1% over what we were expecting actually does. We're projecting at least that it'll lower the contribution rates by 2% or so for these next couple of years until we end up back down at the kind of the 6%, what we call the floor rate, which is the same as the member rate. And then the fourth chart on here, the fourth graph on here is the purple line up top, and those are the stable contribution rates, which are from the Egress policy. And those are just based on whatever the prior year's rate was plus 0.35%. Those are really unchanged from the supplements and from this return positive return scenario. But you will note that if you look at the 2023 rate, the 16.09, that rate in reality, since these are the rates that are really being paid, that rate in reality is a little bit higher because there's an additional amount added on top of it for the supplement. And then there's also an additional contribution coming in from the funded liability solvency reserve of 0.05. So during 2023, the 16.09 on the stable line actually will be 17.07, I believe, is what the real amount is that should be coming in for the year. And then if we flip over on slide 4, it's the same graphs, but just showing what the impact of the funded ratio is. And you can see in this sense now, the green graph, the graph that shows the 9.6% return, that's on the top because that does help the funded ratio. And you can see that right now we're projecting that based on this 9.6% return, the plan would reach 100% funding about 10 years earlier. End of 2024 as opposed to the end of 2026, which is where we were projecting back in October. And I think that's kind of the highlights.
Any questions?
Anyone have any questions?
You have states whose graphs don't look like these.
What's that?
You have states whose
We do have we do. Yes. No, these are actually very pleasant graphs to put together.
Typically, the projections we put together, if we want to get out to 100 years, honestly, here we can cut chase after 2026. A lot of states we have to go out to my 100th birthday. It's a ways off, somewhere in the 2060s to get to 100% funded. So it's nice. The graphs aren't as cluttered. You don't have to go out, 3 or 4 decades. So this is not all that common.
So this shows the potential, at least, of getting to 100% funded in the next several years.
Yeah, a lot can happen in between. Obviously, we've seen it, but right now this is the course you're on. If we achieve the 6.5% returns going forward and everything else occurs, yes.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I've got a question. If I've got this right, we had something like $6.5 billion surplus in the state budget. But when it came down to our 2% bonus for this year, State Treasurer, you pay that out, and we're going to pay you back?
I'm going to let Sam answer it, but it's very important. It's a great question.
And then we've had other one-time bonuses too. So was it handled that way then?
He's going to answer that, but it's very important for this board when we talk about the TSERS bonus to retirees. That money is not coming from the plan. It is coming from the general fund. When we talk about the LGERS proposed supplement to retirees, that is coming from the plan itself. So, Sam,
So,
she had a little follow-up question. How's that been done in the past?
so this is consistent with the way it's done with the past. It's an artifact.
Just a little bit for our members.
It's close to one of those green lights. It's an artifact of how the retirement system is funded within the state budget process, because the funding from the general fund and from receipts all comes in through the contribution rate that employers pay each month to us. So we typically don't get an infused from another source or one-time transfer, which could happen, but they just choose to use the existing processes because you don't have to do accounting, you don't have to do any of that. In a normal budget year where you have a state budget or a mini budget that is enacted in July, August timeframe, you're collecting money at least a couple of months ahead of beginning when we pay it out. Just the difference this year is for the 2% one is that the first contribution rates under the new budget were paid in December, the month that was paid out. So there's a 7-month period where we're collecting an equal amount of 2% over and above the regular contribution. It happens every time they do that.
Okay, and the artifact of how it's done is the recipe that was used this time, forgetting about the percentage, just the recipe. Was it similar to the times in the past when it was done?
Yes, sir. It was.
Follow up for you, Linda?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
That's a question. Can we go back a slide?
I hope not.
Sorry, just want to go back. I just want to make sure that I think my vision is on the same as your vision, both under the same understanding. Here we only take the Egress out to, I guess I need something for my vision here.
2027.
2027. So is my vision correct in stating that sometime between the next 8 and 10 years, by this, at current returns, minus no change in the market, by 2031, that the Egress should go away and that the 6% the employee pays in, current employees, coupled with the current pension and returns, should be enough to pay our retirement bonuses, retirement benefits? The answer is no. That Egress line continues even though we're at 6%.
No, the ECRIS line may go away, but the percentage of payroll that the agencies pay on behalf of the employees would, I believe, stay at these.
Goes down to
Pick a year and we'll talk
2031.
about it. In 2031, that would be 6.29% of payroll by the employer.
Okay.
And 6% by the employee.
So this doesn't take into account the employee portion.
Is that accurate?
This is just employer.
Just employer
Okay.
contribution.
That was my vision issue. I was looking at it as a combination of employer employee, and so when we hit 2031, the employer wouldn't have to pay in because the employee 6% already is.
Right, where instead it's both of them are paying 6%.
Blake can confirm this, but I think the state payroll this year is about 13 billion, possibly somewhere around there. So the opportunity for the employer contribution rate to come out even 1% on $13 billion is $130 billion. And so you start contrasting that, for example, with supplements for retirees, you can see why have this line going down, even as gradual as it is highly important. Other questions?
Thank you.
So this will never have the 6% employee contribution in anything we look at.
And it will never achieve, the Duke side where the plan pays all of the employer side and all we're doing is collecting the 6% from the employee. Never hit that number.
not with less people paying in the plan then or not. It's just gonna keep going like this. Is it? Where are we now?
Good morning.
I take responsibility for us being off schedule.
This is Patrick Kinlaw again. What we do, this is on agenda item number 9. The purpose of this agenda item is to apply what you just heard from Kavanaugh McDonald and what was in their valuation reports from October to the funding policies that the boards have already adopted, and to discuss recommendations to the General Assembly for the state board to make to the General Assembly regarding funding and benefits for the upcoming fiscal year, the second fiscal year of the biennium that begins July 1st, 2022. We'll focus first on the executive summary on the first page of this material, although behind that, the materials have additional information in much more detail on each retirement system. For the retirement systems under the oversight of the state board, as Mr. Watts was mentioning, we're in a place that I'm not sure we've been before that simplifies this discussion quite a bit. Namely, there is a state budget, and the budget was enacted after October when the latest actuarial valuation came out. So the state budget for the second year of the biennium already incorporates the costs that were in the latest actuarial valuation report. In terms of the upcoming fiscal year, the state budget provides for one-time supplements for state, judicial, and legislative retirees equal to 3% of their annual pension. And it provides for new money to pay for those supplements all in 1 year. For the disability income plan, the state budget reflects the latest measurements by the actuaries, and the employer contribution rates set by the state budget law for the second year of the biennium are for TSERS 17.07% of pay, for the judicial system 39.29% of pay, for the legislative system 24.27% of pay, and for the disability income plan 0.1% of pay. All of those are sufficient to cover the benefits already promised in the state budget law, plus the one-time supplements that the budget law provides. There isn't really a need to tweak these recommendations to align with the latest actuarial valuation report like ordinarily. There are two places where we believe there are substantive issues for the state board to consider. The first has to do with the National Guard Pension Fund. Under the board's policy, assuming that the board doesn't recommend any change to what's already in the budget for the state system, and that the General Assembly provide a one-time supplement of $55 per retiree under the National Guard Fund, which would be equivalent to 3% of the average annual pension from that fund. The actuaries, Kavanaugh McDonald, have estimated that this supplement would cost about $349,000 for the General Assembly to pay for it in a single year. The second substantive issue for the state board, which will come up for the local board as well, has to do with the retirees' contributory death benefit plan. This is a plan that is optional for state and local government retirees, where they can enroll when they retire, and they pay premiums out of their retirement benefit. If they pay the premiums for at least 2 years, their named beneficiary or beneficiaries will receive $10,000 when they pass away. The plan is designed to be funded completely by the premiums paid by retirees. In recent years, the actuaries have consistently found this plan does not have a short-term funding problem, but it does have a long-term funding problem, where it's projected to run out of money in about 40 or 50 years. That may seem far away, but it's important to start adjusting course now to make sure the plan can be sustained. The present value of the projected shortfall in today's dollars is about $133 million. And if you wait too long in this type of situation, you might find that the only options available to you are not really feasible options, because they wouldn't be allowed by federal law, or they would lead to nobody wanting to sign up for the plan. Both boards could direct staff today to study this plan and come back with recommendations to be made to the 2023 General Assembly to help address the long-term shortfall. At the back of this material, of this agenda item, is a page with draft motions under do three things today, the state board. The first is to recommend that the General Assembly maintain the funding and benefit levels enacted in the state budget. The second is to recommend that the General Assembly additionally provide a one-time supplement from the National Guard Pension Fund equal to $55 per retiree in October of 2022, and an additional state appropriation to pay for the cost of that supplement. And the third is to direct staff to engage with the consulting actuary to study the shortfall in the retirees' contributory death benefit. The second to last page of the material is a page called Summary of Alternatives for Presentation to the 2022 Assembly. It's probably about 5 or 6 pages down from this one. And that encapsulates the key numbers that I just read out under the assumption that the board would choose to adopt those same draft motions. There it is. That's all. Thank you, Commissioner.
We'll get a motion and a second on the table, and then we'll open up for discussion. Do I have a motion from a member of the state board to make the recommendations that are described in the state 2022 alternatives document, including the materials for today's meeting, to recommend the General Assembly, A, maintain the funding and benefit levels that were enacted in Session Law 2021-180, 2, to recommend the General Assembly provide a one-time supplement from the North Carolina National Guard Pension Fund equal to $55 per retiree in October 22, an additional state appropriation of $348,857 to pay for this supplement, and 3, to direct staff to engage with the consultant actuary to study alternatives for addressing the projected shortfalls in the retiree contribution death benefit plan.
So moved, unless I have to repeat all that.
Thank you. Second. Thank you, Dirk. Motion and second by Dirk. Any further discussion?
Just ask maybe one or two questions tops. So the first question is the question that Director Gibson, who I'm sitting in the shoes of today, wanted to make sure that I ask, and it really comes out of the last meeting. So this is the motion on the one-time pension supplement recommendation for state employees. And she wanted me to ask under what conditions the treasurer's office would recommend a cost of living adjustment, a COLA, not a one-time pension supplement, but a COLA looking forward. What kind of funding level for the plan? What kind of excess of investment earnings over the 6.5% rate of return?
I don't know if I'm the right person to speak to that. I'm not a legislative liaison, but I would say that the board does have a funding policy that under which policy the statute provides the board could make that recommendation if the supplement is paid, if the COLA is paid for. As we discussed at the last meeting, we talked about the cost of even a 1% ongoing COLA. And the significant state appropriation that would require. You heard from Mr. Watts earlier about the General Assembly's not having much of an appetite for major changes to the second year of the biennium. So I don't know that there's a line, so to speak, but those are the factors that come into play.
I would just add, Sam.
Sam Watts, please. I would say that the real answer to that question would be point back to the TSERS COLA statute.
So we can hear you better.
I would point back to the COLA statute, the system, the TSERS statute, and I know that you as a former GC, general counsel for our agency, is familiar with that particular word salad. And one key piece of that is that the COLA would not increase the contribution rate paid by the employer. In other words, the board would not recommend the contribution rate increase solely for benefit. You would be able to have an opportunity to, you could certainly not lower it trade-off. You would have to meet all the criteria plus have it funded under the funding policy. So it's admittedly a fairly stringent process to follow, but as I did reference with the problem, graph as I stood up here, we are trying to not fall into the same trap that everyone else has fallen into for the last 800 years, thinking that we can beat basic laws of economics when we really need to stick to our knitting to effectively do a controlled crash to get this to a sustainable contribution rates.
So then just maybe one follow-up, if but this is the question for me. So I think I'm probably a yes on this vote, but I wanted to just ask this question because actuarial math still confuses me, the lawyer. So as I understand it, just bottom line here, we've got 1.3 billion in excess investment gains for the 2020 calendar year. And this vote is about how to spend those 1.3 billion in excess investment gains. Okay, so tell me how I'm wrong so far.
Sorry. I would say that there's $1.3 billion of investment gains reported by the actuary through the calendar year 2020. The board already has a policy regarding how to take the actuarial valuation reports and translate those into funding recommendations for the upcoming year.
Right.
As Sam just mentioned, the statute does provide that the board could make recommendations to use investment gains toward improved benefits if it didn't result in an increase in the contribution rate.
Right.
Or decrease the fundedness of the plan.
Right.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep. And so just looking back, maybe this is where I'm just struggling to figure out exactly what's before the board. In the October meeting materials and here, it states that the maximum this board can do in terms of a recommendation, recognizing the General Assembly makes this decision. Maximum the board can do is issue a COLA of, I believe, 2.6%, which would use that whole 1.3 billion, right?
That's correct.
And that would comply with the law. Okay, so we've got 1.3 billion as the farthest way out we go. But the plan today is to recognize what the General Assembly has done, legislative compromise that puts 257 million of it into a 2% increase that happened in December, this last December, and then a 3% increase happening in October. And the wisdom behind that legislative compromise is we've still got an 85% funded plan, going to be a 90% funded plan coming soon. We're not at 100% yet. So let's take 1/5 of these excess investment gains. Let's enhance retiree benefits. Let's take the other 4/5 and let's increase the funded level of the plan and get us closer to 100%. Am I basically right in understanding that as what the recommendation is?
I think that's a fair characterization of what the General Assembly's state budget law does, is recognizes that there is an unfunded liability of $12 billion in the retirement system, and that the investment gains are $1.3 billion. The only amendment I might make to it is that the General Assembly is not really, in my mind, using the investment gains of $1.3 billion, any part of it,
right,
to provide for those 250 million of supplements. Instead, they've appropriated that money through the 2 years of the plan.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry for that. I just had to get it in my head.
Thank you. So I forgot, we have a motion second. Further questions or discussions? Seeing none, clerk will call the roll.
Dale Paulwell,
Aye.
Blake Thomas,
Aye.
Catherine Truitt,
Aye.
thank you. John Ebbinghausen,
Aye.
Lance Brewer,
Aye.
Linda Gunter,
Aye.
thank you. Margaret Reeder, thank you, Margaret. Oliver Holly,
Aye.
Vernon Gammon.
Thank you. We are now to the part of our, we talk about the local system. A lot of the things that you will be hearing are very, very, yes, are very similar to what you've heard. Larry, and would you like to?
So again, everyone, Larry Langer and Wendy Buckbrook. Here we're talking about the local projections. The policies underlined, those are a little bit different to suit the folks that they're paying. And so, slide 2, we get into the underlying elements of the projections that we have here. First, the assumptions used in the last valuation that we developed. We have 2 scenarios here. One at the 6.5% investment return and one at 9.6% investment return. We don't have any supplement scenarios here. That's not to say it's not going to be discussed. Patrick's going to lead that discussion when we get into the supplements. The employer contribution rate stabilization policy is tucked within there. And more importantly, you'll recall back in October, we didn't have the guardrails modeled within the projections. We have the guardrails modeled here so we can get a sense of what the contributions do, beginning in fiscal years ended 25 through 27. With that, getting on to slide 3, which gets a little bit more into the Egress policy contribution rate. And the big elements here that what this policy has is it has measured increases in the contribution rate of 0.75% of pay for the non-Leo policy contribution. It has the ability to adjust the contributions in case there's assumption changes or benefit changes midway through the cycle. It's explicitly in here. Last time, remember, we had to do that on an ad hoc basis and adjust the policy midway through. Here, it's baked in automatically. Then 5 and 6 are the guardrails. So there's a guardrail to make sure the contribution stays within 1% of compensation on the contribution rate, propping it up in case the contributions are too low. And then item 6 is the one that, beginning in fiscal year 2025, can protect the contribution. And then the Leo policy contribution rate, you'll recall that, the Leo rate, when we measure on an actual basis, is about 2% higher than the non-Leo. Well, the increment that we actually had in place, I think, was just 0.75% of pay. And so we gradually increased the Leo contribution rate to fully reflect the difference in the true value of the rate. So finally on slide 4. Now the slides are simpler now for the local plan. And what I mean by simpler is we're only going to show one scenario because the lines get confused and my vision's getting bad. So here we have in the cornflower at the bottom, that's the actual determined employer contribution. So absent the Egress and the policy contribution, that's the contribution requirements that would come about. And as you can see, over the course of time, those contribution rates are declining. And the primary reason they're declining is because we eventually pay off extra amount of funding that's going on with the plant. The eggplant numbers up at the top, you can see those look a little bit different from what we presented in October. Back in October in 2027, that contribution peaked at 15.1%. But we've implemented the guardrail. The guardrail has the effect of moving the contribution rate closer to the blue, the cornflower contribution there. You can see it's a rather significant adjustment that guardrail has there. Moving on to the next slide, the LEO contribution rates. They're related directly to the non-LEO contribution rates, and you can see that the increment between the policy contribution in the purple and the ADEC in the blue, it's not quite as much, but at least the amount being contributed is higher than the actually determined contribution, and for that we're all grateful. Finally, we get into the projected funded ratio, and these are the two scenarios. In the blue, we have the projected funded ratio based upon the valuation and all the contributions that we showed earlier. And then that weird gray color up above it, that's the funded ratio, reflecting the 9.6% return that happened in 2021. So now on slide 7, we have the 9.6% return baked into the projections, and something notable here is that the maximum amount of guardrail, the maximum amount of reduction you can have in any given year is 1.5%. That's by policy. Remember, I mentioned that the fiscal year ended 2027 contribution was 15.1% when we didn't implement the guardrails. That's what it would have been. But it's down to 10.6%. That's the maximum amount of reduction. It's actually, we maxed out the guardrail. So that's 4.5%, which is 1.5% reduction in any given year, times 3 years is 4.5%. So that's as low as the policy contribution can go. And you can see that the underlying ADEC is lower yet. And on slide 8 is on slide 8 are the LEO contributions. So you can see that increments just a little bit more in terms of the policy contributions, a little bit higher than the actual determined contribution. That's a good thing. Now, as I said earlier, there's nothing in here for a one-time supplement payment, but I feel obliged to make a couple of quick comments before Patrick comes up. One thing, my understanding what's being suggested is that we pay out one-time supplement. I think it was like $33 million, and there is no contribution towards that. All right, and from time to time, that's reasonable. But it's not a well you can go to every year. As we mentioned in the past board meetings, there's no magic money machine. The 6.5% return we're anticipating from the auditing, actually, it's near the top. So it's not like we're anticipating a 4.5% return and the actual returns are, we think are going to be 7%. So we're expecting to generate gains. So you can go about it. You want to do all your due diligence before you go about paying out supplements and not contributing back in. And it's reasonable, I think, right now. The other element is you do eventually end up paying for it. There's $33 million in supplement being proposed, and that reduces the funded status of the plan by about 0.1%, I think. And eventually you pay for that, because in North Carolina you pay off your unfunded liability, you pay it off over a short period of time. So eventually you do end up paying that back. We'll put my soapbox to the side, but I appreciate being able to present this to you all. We do. And any questions or comments?
Any questions? So going back to Blake's earlier comment, even at 6.5%, we're not near the bottom in terms of our assumed rate of return.
In terms of assumed rates of return for states, I think there's a few that are under 6.5.
But we're by no means the lowest.
They're by no means the lowest. And I think the other element I read into that is that your rate of return should be among the lowest. Because I always think of y'all as bunting for signals, not swinging for the fences. There might be a better analogy, but consistently. So whenever, your returns, when things bottom out, and I see this with other funds that we serve, when there is market crashes, I can always count on North Carolina having the highest of those returns. And when we have terrific returns, you're the lowest of those returns. You're in the middle. And that provides for, when your well-funded plan, variation in returns just crush the contribution rates. They fly all over the place when you have that variability. And to try and manage that, y'all try and keep that variance in the returns a narrow window. Great. I'm back to speech class when I was 5. But a narrow window, and that's part of responsibly managing a system, keeping that variability in your returns narrower. So, all right. Did that answer?
Yeah.
I think. All right.
I'll entertain a motion from the LGERS board members to, thank you, Wendy.
Thanks, everyone. So this is Patrick Kinlaw again. Just briefly, as with the state board discussion, now for the local board, we want to take the information you just heard, put it together with the funding policies that you have, and talk about recommendations that the board can make to the legislature for the upcoming fiscal year. And in the case of the local system or LGERS itself, the board has the authority to set contribution rates for employers and to provide benefits within certain conditions. So we'll talk about that. We believe there are 3 issues for the local board to consider. To go ahead and get the third one out of the way, that is the same issue we discussed a little while ago with the state board on the retirees contributory death benefit plan and its long-term projected shortfall. So the local board could also direct staff today to study that plan and come back with recommendations. Moving up to item 1, this is for LGERS itself. The board is setting the employer contribution rate under its statutory authority, and the board has the authority to establish benefits under certain circumstances. And one thing that's happened since our last meeting is that Senate Bill 311 was enacted, and that gives the board the authority to establish one-time supplements for retirees within certain limits.
Which aligns it with the TSERS.
Which aligns it with TSERS, that's correct. The board has a policy called the Egress, or Employer Contribution Rate Stabilization Policy. And under the Egress, as it exists right now, employer contribution rates should increase for the upcoming fiscal year. For non-law enforcement employees, it would increase from 11.35 to 12.1% of pay. And for law enforcement employees, it would increase from 12.1 to 13.1% of pay. That's an increase of about $59 million over what local governments are paying in the current fiscal year.
The 59 million is associated with the Egress.
59 million is the increase under the Egress from current year to future year. Right. The amount that the employers will be paying in the upcoming fiscal year, above and beyond what the actuaries say is required, is a similar number. It's 55 million. The Egress also says right now that the employer contribution rate should be further increased for any additional benefit provided that's not already in statute. The chair has publicly recommended that the board use its authority to provide a one-time supplemental payment to local government retirees in October of 2022, equal to 2% of their annual pensions, but that employer contribution rates should not be increased beyond the increases that are already planned. That is, they'll be set at 12.1% for non-law enforcement employees and 13.1% for law enforcement employees, effective July 1st. The payments of the supplements at 2% of annual pensions would add up to approximately $33 million. And if the board chooses to provide the supplements without further increasing employer contribution rates, staff would recommend that the board amend the Egress for this one occasion to conform with that decision. For item number 2 on your list, the Firefighters and Rescue Squad Workers Pension Fund, there is a state contribution rate stabilization policy, or SCRISP, that calls for a state contribution of about $19.7 million. And that amount is already exactly what is in the state budget for the second year of the biennium. The board has several options available to it regarding funding and benefits, but one option that would be consistent with what we just described for LGERS would be for the board to recommend that the General Assembly provide a one-time supplement to retirees equal to $40 per retiree, which would be about 2% of annual pensions. That would go along with a recommendation of additional funding from the General Assembly of $630,000 for the second year of the biennium. And if the local board made that recommendation, along with the recommendation the state board has already made for the National Guard Fund, the total budget adjustments being requested by the two boards for these two new supplements would add up to less than $1 million. For the Registers of Deeds Supplemental Pension Fund and the Active Employee Death Benefit Plan for local employees, staff does not believe that it's necessary for the board to make a recommendation to change either the contribution rates or the benefit structures for the reasons that are described more fully in your materials. At the very back of this agenda item, I wanted to describe the 3 pages that are at the back for you. The very last page is, and this is agenda item number 11. So I believe it's page 91 of your material is the very last page of this one. The last page has draft motions under the assumption that the board would do 3 things. The first is the chair's recommendation regarding local government supplements. The second is recommend that the General Assembly provide a one-time supplement from the Firefighters and Rescue Squad Workers Pension Fund equal to $40 per retiree and additional state appropriation to pay for that. And the third is directing staff to work with the consulting actuary on the retirees' contributory death benefit plan. The page preceding that, the second to last page, is a draft amendment to the Egress to go along with the first draft motion, and that's the sentence that's added, underlined there at the end of the Egress. It reads, notwithstanding, I just got new glasses, so notwithstanding this provision, in the case of a one-time supplement authorized by the board under K1, which is the new authority, for the fiscal year ending in 2023, in the amount of 2% of each retiree's annual pension, the adjustment contribution rates will be 0. And the page immediately before that, it's called Summary of Alternatives for Presentation to the 2022 General Assembly. It encapsulates the key numbers under the assumption that the board would choose to adopt all of those same motions. That's all I have.
All right. Thank you. We'll entertain a motion and have some discussion. Before doing so, I think we have some folks. Did anybody, this is not the meeting open to the public section, but stakeholders here who are here specifically to comment on what Patrick just said. So please come up and introduce yourself.
Hi, Sarah Collins with the North Carolina League of Municipalities. Appreciate the time today to speak. We're very thankful for this board, the LGERS board's active discussion on this since October. We represent the employers who have seen pretty big increases, as y'all already discussed, their employer contributions specifically over the last 3 years, 1.2%, which is about $80 million each year, an additional $80 million for the past 3 years. We totally understand the needs of our retirees, and we think that the recommendation by the treasurer really matches the what our executive committee believes is the appropriate action to sustain the healthy system that we have. The 2% one-time supplement with no increase to the Egress, we think is a really good way to look at things this year, especially understanding that we have those guardrails in place that Patrick discussed, where in year 3 of this funding policy, We might be seeing a potential for a reduction of the employer contribution rate. In the past, when we've had that ability in the system, that is the time we've provided permanent benefits to retirees. So we think in that fiscal year, I'm going to get it wrong, I think it was 2027, I could be wrong, that's the time to look back and see if that's where benefit gains, permanent benefit gains can be given. So we really appreciate this board's thoughtful consideration. A bunch of these folks have municipal experience. I get to reach out with them a lot and talk to them, or county experience, and we've had very thoughtful discussions since October, and we appreciate your hard work. Thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you, sir. I am Ken Nolan, Wilkesboro Town Manager, but also the chair of the North Carolina City County Managers Retirement Committee. And I do appreciate this board's work to provide us a healthy retirement system. And you've done well with that. And it's exciting to see that we are very close to getting to that 100% funding if we can hold that 6.5% yearly return. I will say my committee did not come out and support the the treasurer's recommendation. However, our committee was adamant in that any benefit to the employee or to the retiree did not come through additional costs to the employers. As you noted earlier, we are stretched, and I just would work or request that this board continue to work to try to maintain any further increases in our Egress policies. It sounds like we're on the right track. And as Sarah said, as things come together, it would be nice to provide a real COLA for our retirees, but we also recognize that the health of the system is first. So I just applaud you for what you're doing today. I would recommend, though, that we try to find ways to look at this system in more of a multi-year approach versus just every year we're making a decision based on last year's return. It would seem that there's a way, and of course I'm not an actuarial in any respect, but to work towards looking at this in the long-term, opportunities that we may have for our retirees. And with that, I just thank you again for what you provided for us.
Thank you. Sam?
Well, I learned a long time ago, if someone says they're going to switch hats, it usually means they're about to argue against themselves. But unfortunately, I get to switch a hat without arguing against myself here. We received a letter last night from the Retired Governmental Employees Association, and the treasurer graciously agreed that we would read it out loud for them as they were not able to be here today. Dear Treasurer Falwell, on behalf of the more than 65,000 members of the North Carolina Retired Governmental Employees Association, thank you for your continued steady leadership shepherding our state's public assets. Your leadership has again proven invaluable, particularly over the last 2 turbulent years. While we have and will keep advocating for a recurring cost of living adjustment for both local and state retirees, we thank you for providing needed bonus money for local retirees. You know how needed this money is for local retirees at this time of market instability and inflation. Thank you also for allowing system returns to fund this bonus rather than placing the budget on local governments. We, like you, want to see our state's defined benefit plans remain healthy and productive for generations of public servants to come. We understand that there are enormous pressures today on defined benefit plans. We hope to be a resource and partner to you as you address these challenges. We look forward to the journey ahead. Regards, Brian Setzer, Interim Director of North Carolina Retired Governmental Employees Association.
Thank you. And you can tell by that signature that Richard Rogers, who most of us are familiar with coming before us, is no longer the head of that organization. So there's been some transition there, and I just thought it was out of courtesy. Should have had an opportunity to present this. So thank you. I'm going to, without objection, read the motion. Blake, since you're most familiar with this, maybe you can make the motion after I read it.
I'm not on this board. I can't do it. I'm sorry. There's that lawyer thing getting in the way again.
So I have a motion from a member of the local board to make the recommendations described in Local 2022 Alternatives document included in the materials for today's meeting to provide a one-time supplement from LGERS equal to 2% of the annual retirement allowances and adopt the draft of amendment number 1 to the Egress. Number 2, to recommend the General Assembly provide a one-time supplement from the Fire and Rescue Squad pension fund equal to $40 per retiree in October 22, an additional state, which would require an additional state appropriation of $630,000 to pay for this supplement. Sorry. And glasses are fogging up. And to direct staff.
Sorry, I thought you were finished.
And to direct, and 3, and to direct staff to engage with the consulting actuary to study alternatives for addressing the projected shortfall in the retiree's contribution death benefit plan.
So moved. This is Catherine Truitt.
Yes.
Lee Atkinson, second.
Okay. A motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Treasurer, I have an amendment that I'd like to add if appropriate, and if it's not, maybe it could be taken up as another agenda item. But in listening to the entire discussions this morning, I want to reiterate what's been presented, that we do appreciate what you and the staff have done to keep this plan viable. I have talked to a number of city managers and other officials, and the most important thing I heard as a consensus is that we all have a fiduciary responsibility to maintain a viable plan. That being said, I think the actions that you all are recommending are appropriate and will maintain a viable plan. The only concerns that I have heard concerning the future viability and the burden that local governments will have to bear as increases are going to be required, if required, should we not meet the Egress or we meet the investment portfolio returns. We need to spread some of the responsibility not only to the local governments, but to our employees. And the motion I would like to make, or an amendment I'd like to make, is that as part of this effort, that we instruct the staff, along with maybe some members of the commission, to develop a recommendation to the General Assembly in the 2023 full session to give us the authority to look at employees' contributions as part of the local effort for the local government system.
Is that Jeffrey?
Yes, sir.
Jeffrey, I'd love for you to consider tabling that until the next meeting in light of two things that have been said here today in this meeting. One is Ken spoke a few moments ago about a more multi-year global type of strategy to this process. The League, the County Commissioner Associations have talked about sustainability of this plan as far as plan design. And on top of all that, the burden, the responsibility for not having this right at my fingertips today falls on me. We have to look at all of this in the context of how many of our employers are actually doing 401 and 457 matches at the local level. So the reason that I want to table that is I think it's just fair to all the stakeholders before we get people, excited or depressed about any of these important topics, that we have all the data available so that we can make real decisions about how to do this. There may be a mathematical way looking out as the League and County Commissioner Association and the funders may be interested in how they're actually going to pay for this going forward. For them, since the matches come from their local boards, and to tell you just how different this can be, we have some local employees who get no match. We have some local employees who get a match whether they put money in it or not. And then we have some local employees who just get a match based on the amount of skin you put in the game.
So and there's some local employees that are required by statute to have a contribution.
Yeah. and on top of the number of employees who are required by statute to have a contribution. So I would love to, for you to entertain, given the fact that you should be, I hope that I'm sending a signal to you that this is something that we've been thinking about. And I'd love to,
Yes, sir.
for you to give us the time to actually study this in a comprehensive basis, no unilateral decisions, everybody, all the stakeholders in the room to figure this out mathematically.
Yes, sir. I have no problem with that. My intent was to take action today, but what you just described was the intentions of my motion that we create a committee to look at all those issues you just identified. Not that we do it, not that we make a decision today or discuss it today, but to develop a future committee actually to address a lot of issues as well as that are out there. So I have no problem whatsoever postponing my request, making it at the next meeting to create that committee, as long as we set a target date that whatever recommendation comes out, we are prepared to present it to the General Assembly in their next full session. I believe it's in 3.
Thank you for that flexibility. I hear you. I understand you, what you're saying, and I think that's very doable, not just with setting forth a vision and a process that is steeped in transparency, but also having a finish line to get all the work done. I will tell you the reason is that, and you know, unfortunately, we're just in a world right now where people want to be affirmed and they don't want to be informed. We're going to talk about a subject that is this serious when local governments are already facing morale issues as far as attracting, retaining essential workers. You know, we got to start out like we're going to hold out in terms of our discussion, what we call it, and where it's headed. Because the last thing we want to do is to send the wrong message, other than the fact that all we're interested in is the sustainability, the strength and the sustainability of this plan and their overall retirement readiness. Those are only 2 goals we really have here.
I concur. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right. Any further discussion? Here, another clerk will call the roll.
Dale Falwell.
All right.
Brenda Howerton. Brenda Howerton. I can't hear you, Brenda. Greg Patterson.
Aye.
I couldn't get it off mute. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Homer Dearman.
Aye.
Jeffrey Morris.
Aye.
Lance Brewer. Lance Brewer.
Aye.
I don't hear you, Lance.
Aye.
Melanie Brady.
Aye.
Tony Brown.
Aye.
Vernon Gammon.
Thank you, members. We'll quickly go through item 12. We're all set for law enforcement. Elio.
So you may recall that previously that there's a provision that allows us to offset the LGERS employer contribution rate for law enforcement officers. Previously, we had presented information about how that offset had been reduced to 0.14% in 2014. A couple years ago, 2020, we got to raise the offset to the contribution rate to 0.20%. And what we did was just looking at with the pandemic and the court cost offsets and how the amount of court costs that the department had been receiving had been going down, and then it really went down during the pandemic. It's come back a little bit, so there's fluctuations in how much you're receiving in court costs. So in looking at it, we did a couple years ago raise the offset so that it decreases the contribution rate, and we're just going to maintain that level while we're still trying to see where do those court costs end up over time. So we're going to keep that at 0.20%.
Thank you. Any questions about that? All right, we have one appointment to the Disability Medical Board. Couldn't figure out what to say, A or N. We'll need a motion to approve staff's recommendation for Dr. David Rockwell. His vita is inside your documentation. And Tom?
Yeah, there's thank you, Treasurer. The Dr. Robert Gaddy, who's been on the medical board for a while, couldn't continue. Medical board recommended. Dr. David Rockwell, his information's in your materials, and he it's a good ad for a medical board, being an orthopedic physician, because most of our cases are orthopedic. So this is really actually going to help his addition to the board, help the rest of the doctors and get cases, more cases through the medical board. So we look forward to working with him as long as we receive the board's approval.
Members, this Disability Medical Board is an important function. And I know this doesn't happen in state government, but there's always the possibility that people try to deal with HR issues through the disability program. Getting a nodding over here. and that's not probably a good thing for the sustainability of either system. So having dedicated people on this medical board, especially an orthopedic orthopedist, when so many of these issues are orthopedic. We have issues of disability with plumbing, issues with electrical, but I'd say orthopedic is a big component of this. So with that, I'll entertain a motion from the state board to approve his appointment.
So moved.
Second. Blake's second. Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Catherine Truitt. Catherine Truitt. Thank you. Dirk German. Aye. Greg Patterson.
Aye.
John Evighausen.
Aye.
Lance Brewer.
Aye.
Thank you. Linda Gunter.
Aye.
Oliver Holly.
Aye.
Okay.
And like motion from the LG board. Motion carries.
Yeah.
From the LG. Like motion from the LG board.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Tony.
Brewer, second.
Who was second?
Lance Brewer.
Oh, thanks, Lance. Motion
Sure.
second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Dale Falwell.
Aye.
Brenda Howerton. Brenda Howerton.
Aye.
Catherine Truitt.
Aye.
Clee Atkinson. Clee Atkinson.
Aye.
Thank you. Greg Patterson.
Aye.
Homer Dearman. Homer Dearman.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Jeffrey Morris.
Aye.
Melody Brady.
Aye.
Tony Brown.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Members, we're now down to our public comment section. Did anyone sign up for public comment? Hearing none, we deem the public comment section closed. Just briefly before we get around to board comments, and stay with us so we can have enough forum to adjourn. Just let you know that we are in the process, as you already heard and voted on, to freeze and then eventually terminate our 403B program for the new board members. This has been around for about 7 years. We only have 90 agencies that participate in it, only 1,400 participants, around $30 million. And based on the internal and the external challenges of the 403B, it's just a product we can never be great at because of the high cost of the things that had to be invested in. So I applaud the people who, stood this thing up 7 or 8 years ago, and we have nurtured it along, but it's just not going to work. So we are working closely with all those agencies. And for your comfort level, you've already heard this before, every single employer who had signed on as a 403B participant is already signed on to either the 401 or the 457. So just want to let you know of how that's going extremely well as far as we're concerned. Of the 84 people, I think 2 or 3 of them may represent 400 of the 1,400 employees. So it's got a lot of ones and twos where we only have 1 or 2 employees. So just want to give you all that update. With that, we'll go around the horn and see if any board members have a comment. Yes.
Well, every meeting I say something about all of our staff in the state of North Carolina, especially in our school system. Today's going to be no different. I want to shout out all of our staff, our volunteers, and everyone that's helping out in the face of COVID. Special shout out to all of our school nurses that have been on the front line of notifying and calling and quite honestly taking some unnecessary heat when we've had to send quarantines out. So special shout out to all of those individuals in the state. Also, 2 other quick points. I just want to celebrate since our last meeting, the election or selection of our state superintendent of the year, Dr. Valerie Bridges, and her nomination of the superintendent for the year. And then lastly, in closing, I'm just going to ask that everybody, the unfortunate, untimely passing of Dr. Elam, president of Halifax Community College. We lost this gentleman this week. I had a chance of working with him when he was in Ahoskie at the Ronald Chowan Community College. So just ask that we keep his family and the staff at that community college in our prayers.
Thank you, Superintendent. And the last time I was on the phone with the superintendent, he had to hang up because he was actually himself driving the school bus, taking children back home. So when they say all hands on deck, that's definitely happening in Terrell County. Appreciate it. Yes, Tony.
If I could, I'd like to piggyback on what Mr. Polly had indicated. I am from Halifax County, and I knew Dr. Elam personally. In fact, I would say intimately, but we have had lots of conversations about budget, and I've met with him at least 2 or 3 times a year. It's going to be a big loss to not only the community college system, but to Halifax County. And it was somewhat of a surprise. I knew he had some health issues, but I think it was cancer and it came back. So there's been to deal with the recurrence. So you keep his family in your prayers as well. I'd like to also applaud not only the staff here, Mr. Treasurer, but I guess the folks, the team atmosphere that we have, that we are looking out for each other, and we're trying to do the best we can to keep the system, working in a great way. And plus the understanding, I work with both the league and also the County Commissioners Association, and having those conversations, understanding there's things that we can do, the things that we can't do, things that we have to look at long term. So having been on this board, I've had to interact with a lot more people, and I do appreciate, the compassion that we all have to do the right thing, but also the understanding that we have, the challenges that we face as well. So I do applaud everyone in this room and those that support us in this room as to how well we've worked together to make this happen, to get us to where we are today.
Thank you. Others? Yes, ma'am. Ms. Linda.
I'd like to express my appreciation to the staff too, because everybody, from the people trying to get the call center done, the people who got those checks out in December. I understand. You didn't really elaborate, but I know it was a You didn't know if you were gonna make it at first, that's what I heard, but you got it done. And,
And the W-2 that will go with it.
and the W-2, and in fact, I don't think I've got my W-2.
1099.
I think I moved and maybe I didn't tell you my new address. So I'm gonna
Your beneficiary.
go to Orbit. No, I don't think I have a change in beneficiary, but you can bet I'm gonna check. Cause I thought about that during the meeting. But, yeah, I think that was changed when I got my divorce, but anyway, just everything everybody does. We've got so many challenges in this department. But, I think our retired educators are really pleased with the 2% this year, the 3% next year. We've always got an eye on the prize of that, of a COLA that will be constant. And I'm hoping that we can still do that. And I've said that from the very beginning, but we're going to get there. I hope.
Thank you very much. And anybody on the phone that'd like to comment? Well, we're ending on time. Homer, unfortunately, I've got news that I'll probably be up in your neck of the woods in the next few days, and I'm really sad to hear that. So I'll be sure to look you up when I get to Stokes County this weekend. And if nothing else, we'll adjourn our meeting in honor of Dr. Elam, in honor of Charlotte Mecklenburg, police officer Maya Goodwin, who had just come back from maternity leave, mother of three, whose husband is also a firefighter in Charlotte, and Master Trooper Johnny Horton, who's I met with his parents and three sons. They're all highway patrolmen. And so with that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn in honor of those three individuals.
Sure, I'll make a motion for the teaser board.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Motion second. Any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Dale Falwell.
Aye.
Blake Thomas.
Aye.
Catherine Truitt.
Aye.
Thank you. Derek German.
Aye.
Greg Patterson.
Aye.
John Ebbinghausen.
Aye.
Lance Brewer.
Aye.
And Bernie Gammon.
Teachers board's adjourned. Now entertain a motion to adjourn the elders board in honor of those three individuals.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Dale Falwell. Aye. Brenda Howerton. Brenda Howerton.
Aye. Aye.
Catherine, thank you. Catherine Truitt.
Aye.
Clea Atkinson.
Aye. Aye.
Homer, thank you. Homer Dearman.
Aye.
Jeffrey Morse.
Aye.
Lance Brewer.
Aye.
Melanie Brady.
Aye.
Vernon Gammon.
Thank you. And just want to mention Sheriff Clee, I was up there recently touring the site, and for board members who aren't aware, before you've heard of COVID, Edgecombe County is seated with COVID or the total destruction of a 1 million square foot building called QVC that employed 2,000 people, which literally melted to the ground, metal building. And so Sheriff Clee, I just want to let you know that I was up there visiting with some of the economic development folks as the state treasurer. And so you continue to be in our hearts and prayers. Sorry for the loss of the one life, but as we try to rebuild your community, because we know that people not having jobs is not a good thing for the Sheriff's Department of Edgecombe County. So just want to let you know that.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you, and just keep us in prayer. I appreciate you a whole lot, Mr. President. Appreciate you.
Thank you. And we're,
What-
they'll just
M-
hear about.
That happened.
Sorry?
When did this happen? I was not aware of this.
Before Christmas, and ATF is in the final innings of its report to tell you what happened. But it happened before Christmas, and 2,000 employees toward a shift change in the busiest time of the year. One tragic loss of life, but there were 600 people going in and coming. Sure, Sheriff Clee will, next time he sees this, will hopefully give us a more positive update about how things are going. So we're here about
My prayers to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.